bookish people, welcome back to my channel. My name is Megan. In today's video we are going to do a complete plot breakdown of As Good as Dead by Miss Holly Jackson. I did it, you guys. I finally read the final book in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. It was crazy, it was wild, it was bananas, it was unhinged, and this will conclude my plot breakdowns of this series. There is a novella for the series, Killjoy. I will not be doing a plot breakdown for it, but I will be reading it in my summer ween vlog, so go check that out if you want to see my thoughts and feelings on the novella. But let's get into this book because let's not waste any time because this is gonna get crazy. The beginning of this book kicks off by catching us up on where our characters have been since the ending of book 2. If you don't remember book 2, we have Charlie, Pip's neighbor, who moved to Fairview to track down Child Brunswick, who turned out to be Stanley Forbes, and Pip happened to be in this situation and Charlie shot Stanley in front of Pip 6 times. Pip tried to save his life to no avail. Stanley died, and Pip has been dealing with a lot of trauma since that. In the beginning of this book, we figure out that Charlie is still on the run, but his wife Flora has turned himself into the cops. But most importantly, Pip has been dealing with so much trauma and PTSD from those events. She thinks her hands are covered in blood, but when she looks down, it's really just sweat. She visualizes Stanley being shot in front of her when she's just out and about in town. She hears the gunshots ringing in her head, and she is just dealing with a lot of trauma right now. And to top it all off, the worst person in the world, Max Hastings, is suing Pip for defamation. So let's just catch this up on the board. Max is suing Pip for defamation because if you remember at the end of book 1, Pip secretly recorded Max admitting to assaulting Becca on tape. And then in book 2, she posted it on her podcast when Max was found not guilty in the trial. So now Max is suing Pip for defamation, which how does that even work? Because the voice recording is real. Because Max is saying, not only am I suing you for $7,000, but also part of this deal is you need to go on your podcast, issue a retraction, and say that you doctored the tape and I didn't really do those things. And Pip is like, oh hell no, throw the legal system at me, I don't care, let's go to court, because if we can't get you with criminal justice, we can get you with civil justice, and I will prove with all my witnesses that you really are a predator. So needless to say, the mediation meeting doesn't go well, and then we flash forward to Pip going home and she's hanging out with the love of her life, Ravi. Ravi. This is not even a romance novel, but Ravi is a top tier book boyfriend. Pip and Ravi are hanging out on their couch, and her little brother Josh is there. And her little brother starts saying that he's been noticing somebody watching the house. But Pip and Ravi are like, oh, he's just a young kid. We just dismiss his claims. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Pip, you are a public figure. You know what happened these past 2 years. Why are we just dismissing these claims like, oh my god, no one's watching my house. Pip, you're the investigator. Investigate. Like, I don't understand how there was no alarm bells going off at this point. It was just like an easily dismissed comment. After Ravi leaves her house, Pip goes upstairs, she opens her door, she pulls out a fake bottom to the door and reveals all these burner phones that she uses to contact Luke Eaton. If you remember him from the last book, he is Nat De Silva's ex-boyfriend. He is a drug dealer and he is supplying Pip with Xanax because she has developed a Xanax addiction in response to her trauma. She is using Xanax to cope with her PTSD because she says without it she cannot sleep. We also learn that Pip has been getting anonymous emails from somebody who has been emailing her over and over again the same exact phrase: who will look for you when you're the one who disappears? But Pip just is like, oh, it's probably nothing. I'm a public figure. I'm a true crime podcaster. Someone's just messing with me. Pip, someone's emailing you this and your brother's saying someone's watching the house. Like, why are the alarm bells not going off yet? Pip has also taken up running as a way to cope with her PTSD and trauma. She goes for runs. One day she comes back from a run and she noticed that there's headless stick figures in chalk written on her driveway. And now she's getting a little suspicious. She's like, what is going on? This is a little scary. Because then further up the driveway, she finds 2 dead pigeons with their heads cut off. And she starts freaking out. She calls her mom over and her mom just easily dismisses them. She's like, oh, the chalk drawings are probably just from neighborhood children. Like, a dead pigeon in our driveway is definitely just from the neighbor's cat who came and killed it and left it in our driveway. No big deal. Don't worry about it. I don't understand. Like, a headless dead pigeon in your driveway, headless stick figures, and we're not connecting them. We're not concerned. So then Pip goes upstairs. She checks on her podcast email again and she gets the same message, but this time it has a PS. So it says, who will look for you when you're the one who disappears? PS, it's always better to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That with the pigeons in the driveway, now Pip is like, okay, I'm concerned now, but she's also questioning it. She's like, are they really connected? She's like, why has this person been emailing me for months, but now finally they're doing something that's happening in person? Because Pip is a public figure and her podcast is national, she's like, well, the person anonymously emailing me could be a prankster from literally anywhere in the country. But now she's getting worried because something happened at her house. So she's like, okay, if this person really is like stalking me. They're not only emailing me, but they know where I live, which means they're in my town of Fairview. Pip starts thinking back to other weird things that have happened to her throughout the past couple of weeks. She remembers getting an envelope with her name written in really bold, scratchy letter on the front, but when she opened the envelope, nothing was inside. She thinks back to Stanley Forbes' funeral where somebody left a bouquet of roses on her rearview mirror, but there was no roses. All the petals were on the ground and it was literally just a bouquet of thorns. Because Pip is dealing with all this PTSD and trauma, she's not sure if she's just trying to make something out of nothing or if all this stuff is actually happening to her. She just doesn't trust her own judgment right now. It's a new day. Pip has gone for another run, and as she's making her loop back to her house, she notices a couple houses up on the sidewalk in chalk is the words "dead girl walking." And Pip gets super suspicious of this, but she's again conflicted. She's like, okay, well, this wasn't written in front of my house, so how do I know it's for me? She's like, but this is written on my jog. Like, she takes the same jogging path every day, and where this says "dead girl walking" is usually when she starts jogging and starts walking home. She's like, if this is a stalker, this person has been watching me because they know this is the point in which I start walking on my jog, and they wrote "dead girl walking," and it's not in front of my house, so how can I report it to the police? Because they're going to be like, oh, this was at your neighbor's house, not your house, so this really has no connection to you. Pip finally decides she's going to tell somebody about her stalker theory, and she tells Ravi, and Ravi convinces her to go to the police. And thank you, Ravi. Convince her to go to the police and let them know about everything that has been going on. Pip reluctantly goes to the police and tells Detective Hawkins about all the incidents that have taken place over the past couple of weeks, and he's basically like, I'm sorry, that's just not enough information to determine if you have a stalker or not. It's not enough information for us to even investigate if you have a stalker. And the more he is telling her that he can't investigate it, the more it is affirming Pip's belief in her mind that she really does have a stalker. So before, she was just kind of like, I don't know what to make of this, but someone not believing her really just made her believe in herself, and she's like, no, I'm right and I'm in danger and I need to get to the bottom of this because the police are not going to help me. As Pip is running out of the police station, she runs into Daniel De Silva, the police officer, Nat's brother. And although he is Nat's brother, Pip still doesn't like him. In the past 2 books, Pip has thought of him as a potential suspect, and she's like, yeah, I definitely accused him publicly twice. I outed his whole thing with Layla even though he's married, so like he might be one of my enemies, so if I do have a stalker, he is on my suspect list again. Ravi is over at Pip's house, and when he comes in, Pip is acting really weird and she's just staring out the window, and he's like, hey, are you okay? And he looks out there and he's like, what are you looking at? And she's like, I put bread in the driveway to attract the pigeons, and then I put ham in the grass to attract the cats, because if the cats come and eat the ham and then they see the pigeons eating the bread, if the cat really did kill the pigeon, then the cat would attack the pigeon, and then I would know if the cat is really the one who left the dead pigeon in my driveway. And Ravi's like, are you okay? Like, what is going on? This is a bit too far. This is a bit too weird. We need to get you out of the house, and we are going for a walk. While they're on the walk, they run into Aunt and Lauren, who just continue to be terrible people, which, ew, I hate them, and I'm so happy we never hear from them again in this book, because just go away. When they walk back into her driveway, Pip notices the headless stick figures written in her driveway again. But this time she notices that they're a little more spaced out, and that 2 of them are on the wall leading up to her window. And now Ravi is there to validate this. He's like, oh my god, that's weird. And Pip's final words for that chapter are, they're coming for me. Reflecting on everything her stalker has done, Pip realizes this is not his first rodeo. This is a professional stalker. He has done this before. So Pip decides to take the keywords of what has happened to her, put it into Google, see if there's any true crime cases that are similar to hers. And when she does that, she stumbles across an article about the DT killer, which is a serial killer that was terrorizing the towns surrounding Fairview a couple years ago. But she's confused by this because the DT killer was caught and thrown in jail 6 years ago, so it is a closed case. DT stands for the duct tape killer, because what he would do is he would bound their hands and their feet so they could not move, and then he would wrap their entire head in duct tape except for leaving 2 slits where their nostrils are so they could breathe. Because his MO is duct tape, this is also starting to ring alarm bells, because during one of Pip's jogs, when she was running, she felt something on the bottom of her shoe, and she looked down and there was a piece of duct tape on the bottom of her shoe. And now the MO of her stalking is similar to an article about the DT killer. It was never well known that the DT killer stalked his victims prior to killing them. The police don't even really know that. Only one of the victims reported weird events happening to them to their immediate circle. So one of the victims told her sister, hey, like, there's dead pigeons in the driveway. There is chalk figures. I'm getting prank calls. So because none of the other victims told their surrounding family these things were happening to them before they were murdered, the link was never made. But Pip is like, this is too much of a coincidence that this girl is saying she found dead pigeons, headless chalk figures, and she was getting prank phone calls. Ravi is absolutely freaking out. He's like, oh my god, my girlfriend has attracted the attention of a serial killer. What do we do? But Pip is like, calm down. He's in jail. Pip is doing research on the DT killer and realizes that his last victim was killed on April 18th, which is the same day that Andy Bell was murdered. Billy Cara is the name of the man who was convicted for being the DT killer, although Pip finds a website run by Billy's mom who is convinced that her son is innocent. And while Pip is like, yes, like, she probably just thinks her son's innocent because who would ever want to believe that of her son, his mom has receipts. So she's like, no, they were using illegal interrogation tactics on him. And then the next morning, he immediately recanted his statement, but the police didn't care because they felt they had enough evidence against him. Even though they coerced the confession out of him using illegal tactics, they were like, this is a slam dunk in court. And this is where the mystery finally begins, 120 pages into the book. If you want to know why it's 4-star, not a 5-star, there you go right there. 120 pages to get to this moment. Pip reaches out to Maria Cara, who is Billy's mom, to ask her for an interview. But when she's talking to her, Maria says, oh my god, you've finally gotten back to me. And Pip just kind of plays along with it, and she's kind of confused by this, but it turns out Maria emailed her during her second season of her podcast to tell her about Billy's case, how she thinks Billy is innocent, and she wanted Pip to investigate to clear his name. Maria tells Pip that Billy was interrogated by the police for 9 hours straight. He was sleep deprived, he was tired, and he didn't know what was going on. He was becoming very disoriented by the way the police were talking to them, and they told him that they had someone placing him at the scene of the crime, which was not true. It was also known that Billy had a drinking problem back then, so the police convinced him that he killed the girls while he was blacked out drunk, which is why he doesn't remember doing it. She also tells Pip on the second victim of the DT killer, there was an unidentified fingerprint, but because the police felt that Billy was the culprit, they just never investigated it further. Maria also tells Pip that during the night of the third victim's murder, that Billy was actually home with her, but she has no way to prove it. Billy worked for a landscaping company that had contracts with all these different properties, so Billy worked in all these different locations, and one of the locations Billy worked at was a hotel, and that is where the final victim's body was found, and the victim's body was found by Billy. He saw her under a tree, and he ran over to her, and he thought the duct tape on her head was preventing her from breathing, so he was ripping off the duct tape, and then he was like, oh my god, she's still not breathing, so he decided to give her CPR, so he put his DNA and his fingerprints all over this girl's body, but she was already dead. And then he started freaking out. He ran to the front desk and was like, you need to call the cops because I just found a dead body. Again, because he put his DNA all over the body, the police used that as evidence against him. They had this theory that most serial killers will try to insert themselves in the investigation so that Billy finding the body actually makes him a suspect, because that would discount the evidence on her body. Like, oh, I'm just an innocent bystander. I touched her body trying to save her. I'm not the killer. Like, obviously those are my fingerprints, so you can rule them out. So the police thought Billy was trying to play some like 3D mind chess with them. Billy also had connections to the other victims. So the third victim, where Billy's mom says he was home during the murder, was one of Billy's supervisors at his job. And the first victim was found at a golf course that Billy was working at, again, because it's a landscaping company. One of the contracts was at a golf course, and the girl's body was dumped at that golf course, and Billy's van was seen that day entering the golf course, but of course he was just going to work, so he didn't find that body, but it was there while he was working. And through forensics, we find out that the duct tape and the ropes used on the victims are ones that Billy could have easily had access to from his work. Maria says the name of the company that Billy worked for was Green Scene Limited, that had a sister company called Clean Scene Limited, and Pip is like, oh my god, this is ringing so many alarm bells for me, because Green Scene Limited is owned by Jason Bell, Andy's dad. Connection, because remember, the DT killer's last victim was the day Andy Bell was murdered, and now this guy who has all this evidence stacked against him, which primarily has to do with work, that company is owned by Andy Bell. No, Jason Bell. Well, we just gotta add all this to the board because I'm getting carried away with the story and I'm not even writing anything down. So we have Billy, the suspect, who works for Jason. Then we have Billy's mom, Maria, who reached out to Pip. There we go. It's on the board now. Pip is starting to get convinced by Maria, but she has one more question for her. If Billy was not the killer, why did the killer stop when Billy went to jail? And Maria says she's been doing a ton of research on serial killers, and what she has learned is that serial killers will stop killing for multiple reasons. One is if there is a big life event happening. Number two, if they just kind of age out of it, right? They're old age, they can't really kill like they used to be able to kill, so they just don't do it anymore. or again, if they have a big life event that can kind of trigger them to stop doing it. Now, this is where the mystery got a little frustrating from me, because just based on this interview with Maria, it was so clear to me who the DT killer was, and Pip just like could not figure it out for like the next 100 pages. The last victim of the DT killer was found on April 18th, the day Andy Bell died. So big life event, Andy Bell dies and the last killing happens. Oh, it's almost like the killer had a big life event, i.e. his daughter's death, and that is why he doesn't kill anymore. Also, a lot of the evidence against Billy is related to his work that is owned by Jason Bell. So Jason Bell's daughter died on the 18th, no more killing, big life event. It all relates back to the work that is owned by Jason Bell. During this time period, Daniel De Silva was also working for Green Scene Limited. So Pip's first conclusion is like, oh, Daniel is one of my enemies because I accused him in the last 2 books, on the last 2 seasons of my podcast, I made him a suspect, so he obviously hates me. And him working at the company during the time of these killings obviously means he is my suspect once again, and I think Daniel De Silva is the DT killer. After her interview with Maria, Pip gets another phone call. She answers the call. It's from a no-caller ID number. And she's like, Maria, is that you? But there's no one on the other line, and then they just hang up. Then Pip thinks back to the victim who told her sister she had stick drawings in the driveway, dead birds in the driveway, but she also said there's prank calls 1 week before the murder. So now Pip is like, oh my god, the DT killer is escalating. It's clearly not Billy. He's clearly still out there, and I'm getting a prank call, which means I have 1 week until he's gonna kidnap me. Maria sends Pip the transcript of Billy's interrogation, and now Pip is fully convinced that Maria is right and Billy is innocent, because in the interrogation, Billy has no idea what is going on, and it is so clear that all the information that he knows about the killings is being fed to him by the police. And then, of course, our anonymous emailer comes back, leaving Pip the message, who will look for you when you're the one who disappears? So Pip has convinced herself in her head that Daniel De Silva is the DT killer. Oh yeah, we should write him on the board too. Pip is convinced that Daniel is the DT killer, so she's like, I need to go talk to Jason about what was going on in his company during that time frame. I'm like, Pip, you never learn. Like, you never ever learn. Even after the traumatic events of book 2, we're still not learning to not go, like, confront people by ourselves. So Pip decides, I'm gonna go to Jason's house, I'm gonna confront him because I wanna know what happened back in the day. So Pip, being Pip, is confronting Jason, and she's like, when I was researching Andy's disappearance, I had an interview with Jess Walker, who was one of Becca's friends, if you remember, and what she said was that Jason and Dawn, Andy's parents, were at a dinner party, and they had to unexpectedly leave because Jason got an alarm notification from a Green Scene office that someone had broken in. So he goes to the office, and Pip is like, hey, so when you went there, did you ever find out who broke in? Did you notice any duct tape or rope missing? Because this has to do with the DT killer case. I'm like, are we not putting 2 and 2 together, Pip? Like, as you're saying it out loud, are we not putting it together what is going on? And you're like potentially confronting a serial killer right now? Jason gets super angry, and he's like, Pip, get off my property. And also, not only get off my property, but never contact me or anybody in my family ever again, because I want you out of our lives. When Pip leaves Jason's house, she gets another phone call from a no-caller ID. She answers the call, and again, there's just pure silence on the other end of the line. Pip suspects that the DT killer is going to call her again using a no-caller ID phone number, so she downloads this app on her phone so that when somebody calls her from a no-caller ID phone call, it'll get rid of that and just show her the phone number who's actually calling. So she's hoping she can use that phone number to track down who the DT killer actually is. The DT killer's victim that reported these incidents before being killed was a Julia Hunter, and she told her sister Harriet Hunter. So Pip reaches out to Harriet and says, hey, I would like to interview you for my podcast because I am covering the DT killer case. Harriet agrees to the interview and basically just says the same thing that she said in the magazine interview like a couple years ago. Julia told her there was dead pigeons in the driveway, there was headless stick figures drawn in chalk, and also she was receiving prank phone calls with nobody else on the other end. But then Harriet mentioned something interesting. After Julia died and she was the 4th victim of the DT killer, Andy Bell reached out to Harriet and said, hey, like, if you ever need to talk to someone, I will be a friend to you. So Pip asked Harriet if she could see the email correspondence between her and Andy, and she realizes that in the email, Andy calls her H8. And if you think back to book 1, one of the secret initial writings that Andy had in her notebook were HH. So her and Harriet, Andy and Harriet, were meeting up regularly, and Harriet just confided in Andy about her sister's murder. So now Pip is reflecting back on her photos that she took in Andy's Andy's room because she realizes that Andy had an interest in the DT killer case, which meant it had to be someone close to Andy, and Daniel Da Silva was always in Andy's house because he was friends with Jason Bell. So this is just further solidifying in her head that Daniel Da Silva is the DT killer, which, like, what's going on here? One of the pictures is an overview of Andy's desk with the diary, but there's also some items in there. And one of the items is a purple hairbrush that has blonde hair in it. We learned earlier in the book that the DT killer always took trophies from his victims, and one of the trophies he took was a purple hairbrush, and he took that from a blonde victim. It's right there, Pip. It's right there. It is right in front of your face, but yeah, Pip has not made the connection yet. This is just our foreshadowing, but Pip hasn't made the connection in her head yet. Then Pip receives a phone call from Detective Hawkins letting her know that they caught Charlie Green, and she's gonna have to be the star witness for the prosecution, which Pip is kind of against, and she doesn't really want to do it. Detective is like, you have to do it. And then he asks her if there's any update on her stalker, and Pip tells him no update, totally fine, nothing else has happened. You're right, it was all in my head. Pip, what are we doing here? What are we doing? I'm not understanding Pip in this book. Like, thoroughly entertained during this book, but like, Pip, you are making me question you as a character. What are you doing? Why do you not tell the detective? She's like, oh, they never believe me. Yes, but maybe if we have potential serial killers coming after us, we should tell a cop. You know, just maybe common sense that would tell us to do these things. One of the things that Pip learned during her interview with Harriet Hunter is the email that Andy was using to correspond with her was an email that Andy didn't share with anybody else. So it was basically a secret email. So Pip decides she needs to break into this email, and she figures out what the security question and answer is from Becca. And when she gets in the email, it's just basically everything with Harriet that she already saw, but then she goes to her draft folders and she realizes that Andy was researching the DT killer case. And not only that, but she knew who the DT killer was. She talks about how the inside of her house is not safe anymore because the DT killer is inside her house, and that she can't go to the cops about it because he is practically one of them. You guys, Pip has still not put it together at this point in the book. He is inside her house. Pip, who is inside her house? Who? Her father is inside her house. Jason Bell is inside her house. Can't go to the cops because he is practically one of them. And Pip is like, oh, that must be Daniel Da Silva because he just passed the police thing. So he was a newbie cop. So I was like, Pip, but why would she use the word practically one of them if he was a cop? Like, even if you're a new cop, you are a cop. You're not practically a cop. So who would practically be a cop? Jason Bell. And remember in the first book, because I remembered this very clearly from the first book, Jason convinced Daniel to join the police force. My head was hurting at this point because I was not understanding how Pip is not putting this together. You solved Andy's disappearance, but you cannot solve this case when it is blaring you in the face. Okay, we updated the board. I don't know why I'm being so bad at updating the board because I guess this one isn't so much connecting the dots as it is just an insane story. Next, Pip interviews Detective Nolan, who is the one who coerced the confession out of Billy, and she just wants his thoughts on the case and what he remembers. And she asks him if he thinks that the confession is a good, solid confession. He's like, yes, he definitely did it. Yet the trophies were never found in Billy's possession. And the cop's like, oh, he must have thrown them away. And Pip was like, but isn't the whole point of the trophy for the serial killer to keep it so they can like memorialize the death and remember it and relive the moment? And he's like, oh, well, he knew we were after him and he just had to get rid of it because he didn't want any evidence against him. Then he says exactly what Maria said. The reason they thought that he was the killer is because he inserted himself into the investigation by finding the body, and that serial killers will always insert themselves into the investigation. And at this point in my head, I'm thinking, do we remember from book 1 when Jason convinced Daniel to become a cop? Well, maybe he did that because Jason didn't want to insert himself into the investigation himself, but he wanted the cop to insert himself into the investigation so he would know what's going on without actually being there so that he wouldn't be a suspect. Because in this interview, the detective even says like, oh yeah, at one point we were looking at this rookie cop because he was asking too many questions. And Pip is like, oh my god, that means Daniel is the DT killer. And this is where it just hurts my brain even more. Like, Pip, you were so smart. You were so smart. Like, what is happening to you? One night, Pip is sleeping in her bed, and then she gets woken up because her printer starts going off. And somebody is wirelessly printing something to her printer. She pulls it out and it says, who will look for you when you're the one who disappears? P.S. I learned this trick from you. Season 1, episode 5 of your podcast. What will be my next trick? I'm kind of paraphrasing there, but that was the general sentiment. And Pip is like, what the heck is going on? And then all of a sudden, all the wireless speakers in her her room start blaring at full volume, like heavy death metal music. Pip starts screaming, her brother starts crying, her parents get out of bed, they're like, Pip, what is going on? The whole neighborhood is gonna be woken up now. And Pip doesn't tell them what is happening, doesn't show them, no, doesn't be like, oh, she's like, oh, my speaker must have accidentally went off in my sleep, I'm sorry. Pip, you think a serial killer is after you. And we don't even inform your parents. You have the note. Your parents are witnesses to the music. And you're not going to tell them? And Pip runs to her window. Like, as soon as this happens, she runs to her window and she notices, like, a manly figure running away from the house. And she's like, it has to be Daniel Da Silva. The next morning, Pip is on her way to Nat's house because they're besties now. And she gets a call from the DT killer. But remember, she installed the app. So now she has a DT killer's phone number. And when she answers the phone, she's like, DT, I'm coming after you. I'm going to put you in jail. You're going to be behind a cage. And all of a sudden, she gets a hand slapped over her mouth. She gets thrown into a trunk of a car, and Pip is now kidnapped. Pip is in the trunk of the car. She's like, what do I do? The only thing she can think to do is, because she can't escape, her hands are bound by duct tape, and so are her feet. She's like, I have to just make sure my DNA evidence is all over this car, so whoever the killer is, they figure it out. So she starts scraping her cheek along the carpet, getting rug burn, trying to get her skin cells into the carpet. She starts trying to pluck out her hair and put her hair fibers in the carpet. She's like rubbing her hair against the roof of the trunk. She's like, there is no way this person's gonna get away with this because all of my DNA will be all over here. The killer opens the trunk and he is finally revealed to be Jason Bell. Are we shocked? Are we shocked or are we shocked? I mean, we're not shocked, but Pip is shocked. So Jason brings Pip inside the Green Scene offices and ties her up and then puts duct tape all over her face, just like the DT killer, and admits, yeah, you're right. Someone did set off my alarm the night that Andy disappeared. The night of the last DT killer's victim, my alarm went off. And you know who it was? It was Tara, my last victim. She escaped somehow. She set off my alarm, so I had to come back here and take care of it. After Jason Bell's done giving his evil villain monologue, he wrapped Pip's head up. He's like, all right, peace out. I'm out of here. Have fun. Just like anticipating my arrival to when I come and kill you. And then he says, I turned off all the cameras and no one's going to bother us here. My office is in the middle of nowhere. No one can hear you scream. No one's coming. We have the whole weekend before someone shows up here. After Jason leaves, Pip so unrealistically escapes. She somehow gets her duct tape bound hands free, her duct tape bound feet free, and pulls off this on top. I was reading this chapter so slowly, trying to figure out the logistics of what she was doing. But even with me reading it slowly, I still could not figure out how it was humanly possible for her to escape this. So Pip breaks free, she smashes a window, she crawls out of the room, and then she's running into the forest. And as she's running away, she notices Jason Bell's car returning. Now Pip is at a mental crossroads. She knows she can go one of two ways right now. She can keep running, she can go to the cops and tell her everything she knows, or she can turn around and go murder Jason Bell to prevent him from killing anybody else. Because she's like, why would I go to the cops? They're not going to believe me. They never believe me until something really bad happens. Something bad's really happened to me, but I still don't think they're going to believe me. So Pip decides, okay, let me turn around. Let me go a little vigilante on Jason Bell and take care of this myself, because the police department in Fairview sucks and I'm the one who has to do it. So what does Pip do? She's like, let's go back. She sneaks up on him, she grabs a hammer, and then she smashes his head with a hammer over and over and over again. Pip is freaking out because she has no idea what to do now. What she does know is she needs Ravi. She needs her man with her, but she doesn't want to call him because she doesn't want that trace evidence. So she goes in Jason's car and finds his burner phone. And from there, she uses his burner phone to call Ravi's landline. So Pip tells Ravi to come, doesn't tell him exactly what happens, but tells him to not come on any of the back roads because she can't have him caught by any cameras. When he gets there, Ravi obviously wants to call the cops. Pip's like, no, we can't do that. They'll never believe me. And this wasn't even self-defense. I was escaped. I came back and did this to him. We need to somehow get away with murder. And then Ravi, being the golden retriever boyfriend he is like, oh, my love, you want me to help you get away with murder and commit this massive felony that could put me in jail for the rest of my life? Let's do it. So the way that they are going to get away with murder is they need to manipulate the time of death because they both need alibis, but they still will have a murdered body. So they're gonna need a suspect. And who does Pip decide is gonna be her suspect but Max Hastings? That's right, the person who walked free. Pip is like, oh, not on my watch, because even though you didn't commit this crime, I'm gonna frame you for this crime because you deserve jail time. You know what I mean? So like, I'll just take justice into my own hands. We will throw you in jail for this. So Pip and Ravi put their plan in motion, and the first thing they have to do is to manipulate the time of death. And the way they do this is they take Jason Bell's car and they put it on the coldest setting possible and leave Jason Bell inside to get his body really cold to prevent rigorous mortis and lividity. Okay, am I using those terms correctly? I don't know. I just remember those terms. They have to do with science things. They have to do with time of death. And I'm not going to pretend to use them correctly because I have no idea what they mean, okay? But in order to prevent those things from happening or breaking down or whatever, she puts him in a really cold car. So while his body is in this cold car, they're gonna go get their alibis and then come back and warm his body up to start the breakdown process again. After they leave, Pip calls Luke on a burner phone and she's like, hey, I don't need Xanax anymore. Like, I need the stronger stuff now. Give me the Rohypnol. Give me the roofies, because this is what Pip needs to set her plan in motion. But Pip realizes she can't pull off her plan on her own, so she has to go to her friends, ask them for her help, but also tell them, you can never ask me about what happened and you have to deny involvement in anything that takes place tonight. Connor, Jamie, Nat, and Pip all go to Max Hastings' house to enact their plan. Nat knocks on the door to distract Max while Pip breaks in the back, and what she does is she goes in while Nat's at the door distracting Max. Pip is inside opening Max's water bottle, crushing up the roofies and putting the roofies inside his water bottle. While this is happening, Nat realizes she's losing Max. Max is about to shut the door and be done with this conversation, but Pip is still inside the house. So Nat, not knowing what to do, punches Max in the face, and then Pip runs into the hallway closet and closes the door. Max goes back to the couch, drinks out of his water bottle, and passes out, all while Pip is watching from the closet. And when he passes out, Pip comes out of the closet, and what she does is she takes Max's cell phone and gives it to Jamie and Connor and tells them to drive it to Green Scene, but to not go inside the property, just leave it on the outside of the property. After that, she goes upstairs to grab a few of Max's things. She grabs a hoodie, she grabs a baseball hat, she grabs some of his shoes, and then she also grabs his car keys, unlocks his car door, puts the car keys inside his car door, and then leaves it unlocked so that she can go back for the car later. Next, Pip goes to Kara Ward's house. So now we've updated the board with all her friends' names. We have Nat, Daniel's sister. We have Connor and Jamie, both friends of Pip and siblings. And then Kara and Naomi, siblings and friends of Pip. So Pip now goes to Kara and Naomi's house and asks to borrow their landline. And while she's there, she calls Chris Epps, who is Max's lawyer, and says, hey, I want to accept the plea deal. I'll give you $7,000 and I'll also issue a full retraction on my podcast. The reason she is doing this is because she wants Max's lawyer to call Max with the good news. So when police check Max's cell phone records, they'll see that his cell phone was at the location of Green Scene during the manipulated time of death window. Pip gives the same speech to Naomi and Kara, basically saying, I can't tell you anything that's going on, but what I can tell you is we just need to go out to eat, be seen by some security cameras, having a good time, and we just can never speak of this ever again. And they, being her best friends, agree to help her. So they go to McDonald's so Pip can be seen on all the cameras, and they're just having a good time. They're taking pictures, filming funny videos. After McDonald's, Pip goes back to her house so her parents can vouch for her that she came home at midnight. After she gets home and goes to bed, she waits for her parents to go to bed so that she can sneak out and go back to Green Scene with Ravi, and they take Max's car. Now that they are back at Green Scene, they open Jason Bell's car, and Pip is happy because she realizes the rigorous mortis hasn't set in yet, and she has been successful in delaying the time of death window. So now their plan is to warm up the cars to speed up the body's decay process so that it will be in the time window that she hopes it is. And while they're warming up the body in the car, they are cleaning the whole crime scene to make sure that none of Pip's DNA is at the crime scene. Pip goes inside and she wipes down anywhere she might have touched while she was inside to get rid of all her fingerprints. Ravi is cleaning the trunk of the car over and over and over again to make sure none of Pip's DNA or hair follicles are inside the trunk of Jason Bell. And also, they decide that they need to set the whole place on fire in general so that it will be a big bang, because they need to get rid of the broken window that is in the top of the ceiling that Pip used to escape. After the body is warmed up, Pip puts on Max's hoodie, his baseball hat, and his sneakers. Also, they can get evidence on them. She purposely steps through the blood and hoping that the blood will get on his sneakers, and because his sneakers have a unique tread to them, that they'll be easily to identify these as his sneakers. And also she plans on wearing the sneakers back in his house. So Pip puts on all this stuff. She drags Jason's body around the tree, basically trying to cover up the murder, but also making it easy for the cops to find the body. She puts some of Jason's blood on Max's hoodie as well, and then they light the place on fire and they go back home. Now Pip drives Max's car back to his house, and she drives it wearing the hoodie and the baseball cap and his sneakers, so if anybody sees that on the camera, they'll be able to look at it, and they won't be able to see the face, but they'll be able to see all Max's articles of clothing. They make it back to Max's house, and Pip drops off the car. She puts the keys inside, but she's not done. She purposely wears the bloody sneakers through the house, leaving footprints. She also takes the hoodie and puts it in the sink to try to wash the blood off of it, basically getting in the mind of Max, like, okay, if I just killed someone and I got blood on my hoodie, I would try to wash it off really quickly, and when I realized I wouldn't be able to wash it off, I would put it under my laundry basket. So I would put it at the very bottom of my laundry basket, concealed by everything. And then Pip delivers her most iconic line in the whole series. This is her true badass moment. She's in front of Max's passed out body and goes, "It sucks when someone puts something in your drink and then ruins your life, huh?" We love an unhinged Pip. Now Pip sneaks back into her parents' house, and while she was there the first time when she came home, I didn't say it, but basically she took off all her clothes and the gloves and everything they used at Green Scene, and they put it in a bleach bucket that was in Pip's closet. So now she came home, her clothes have been soaking in bleach for hours. She takes them out, she wrings it out, and she cuts all her clothes up into very tiny pieces, and then over the course of the night flushes them down the toilet. The next morning, Pip's family leaves to go to some adventure world. Pip stays home. She opens her computer. She goes to grab her black headphones, but notices that they're missing. And because she's sleep deprived, she just kind of like assumes, oh, my brother must have taken them, but like, I can't be mad at him. I had a near-death experience and he can take whatever he wants from me, and she doesn't really give it a second thought. Pip is anxiously waiting for the police to find Jason's body and announce it to the news, and they finally do on Tuesday. It hits the news that Jason Bell has been murdered, and when her mom sees it, she looks at Pip and she goes, "Oh my god, please do not make this your season 3. But that is exactly what Pip does. She's like, this is going to be season 3 of my podcast, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Jason Bell murdered. And the reason she does this is because this is what a natural Pip would do. If Pip was not the one to kill Jason, she would be doing a podcast season on him because it is a local murder in her town. So she thinks people expect this of her, so to not do it would be weird. So Pip uploads a teaser for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder season 3, and it is an interview with Jackie, who is an owner of a local coffee shop. A couple weeks before all this happened, Max and Jason happened to be at the coffee shop at the same exact time and got into a physical confrontation. So Jackie talks about that in her interview with Pip. So Pip releases that but bleeps out Max's name, basically to subtly drop the hint to Detective Hawkins, hey, Max is your suspect for Jason Bell's murder, but to not really say it out loud, you know? And as expected, Detective Hawkins reaches out to Pip to come in for a voluntary police interview, and while she's in there, he's just basically telling her, you really shouldn't be doing this season on Jason's murder. You can't interfere with an active police investigation. And Pip is like, well, I solved your last 2 biggest cases because nobody believed me, so actually I do think you need my help. And then he starts asking her basic questions that she was prepared for, like, have you had any contact with Jason Bell in the past couple months or the past couple of weeks? And she's like, no, absolutely no contact with him, lying to him. And then he starts asking her about the headphones she uses for podcasting, and she tells him what brand they are, what color they are. She's just thinking they're in casual conversation. And he's like, well, if you haven't had any contact with Jason Bell in the past couple of weeks, then why were your headphones found in his house? And he drops her headphones on the counter in an evidence bag. Now Pip is freaking out. She feels like her plan is falling apart, and she's like, oh my god, I need to confess. In which, Pip, you literally went through all of this, because during the interview as well, Detective Hawkins talks about the time of death of Jason Bell, and she realizes her plan worked, that they successfully manipulated the time of death window. So the time of death that they have for Jason Bell, she is on camera at McDonald's. So she has a solid alibi for what happened, and not only that, all the evidence that she stacked against Max Hastings just because they found her headphones. Like, girl, you literally could have been like, I don't know, I lost them on my run, they fell out of my pocket, I left them at a coffee shop, he must have just picked them up. I don't know. Like, there's no way that you could prove that like she had anything to do with his murder just based on finding her headphones in his house. And then also the realization dawns on Pip, like, she's like, why would he have my headphones? And she's like, oh my god, like, this was his serial killer trophy. Like, my serial killer trophy was my headphones. That's what he took from me to make his trophy for reliving my murder over and over again. Ravi's like, there is absolutely no way that you're confessing after everything we just been through. And she's like, it's fine, like, I'm not going to mention you at all. I'm just going to tell him what happened and only include myself in the story. And so she tells him this over the phone, and then she's like, okay, I gotta go see Ravi now. She goes and his car isn't there. She's like, what the heck is happening? And then she finally sees Ravi, and she's like, where were you? He's like, I went to go talk to Detective Hawkins. And now Pip is freaking out. She's like, oh my god, what did you tell Detective Hawkins? And then he's like, no, I just told him that I was in contact with Jason Bell, and I went to his house, and I brought your headphones with me because I borrowed your headphones all the time, and sometimes you didn't even know I did it. And I went to his house to talk about doing some sort of scholarship fund in the name of Andy and Sal. And while I was there, we were sitting on the couch and the headphones must have fell out of my pocket, and that's why they were at his house. As the police investigation is going on and they're talking about the manipulated time of death, and she talks to all her friends who all have confirmed her alibis, Pip is realizing her plan is actually working and falling into place. And then one day when Pip is going out for one of her jogs, she passes by Max Hastings' house and notices there's a forensic team combing through his house. Pip also gets an email from Billy's mom, who is the person who is in jail for being the DT killer, and basically tells her that new evidence has come to light and that Billy's case is under review. Now Pip starts feeling guilty because she's like, oh my god, and everything that happened, me covering up Jason Bell's death and pinning it on Max, now they're not going to know that he is the DT killer. She's like, and I just basically locked Billy up for life by not coming clean. So she decides that she is going to go to Detective Hawkins and be like, hey, because I'm researching Jason for his murder case that I'm doing for my podcast, I've come across all this evidence that is a little weird, and I think there might be a connection between him and the DT killer, and try to play it off that way. So Pip goes to the police station, but as she pulls up to the police station, it's the same exact time that they're perp walking Max from the police car inside the station. But then Max sees Pip out of the corner of his eye, and he's like, oh my god, she is the one who did this to me. So he breaks free of the cops, he runs over the Pip, he grabs her neck and he's choking her, and he slams her against the brick wall of the building, and then the cops run over there like, and they pull him off her, right? After the chaos has died down, Detective Hawkins comes out to talk to Pip, and he makes a comment saying like, oh, if anyone was to get away with this, it would be you. Something to that effect, where Pip thinks he knows that she did it, but he just is not able to prove it because the evidence she stacked against Max and the alibi she provided for herself is just too solid for someone to prove otherwise. But in his mind, he has a doubt that it was Pip. So Pip, freaking out, tells Ravi, we need to cut off all communication with each other just in case it turns out that I get in trouble for this. Pip's thought line is if Max goes to trial and is found not guilty, then they still need a killer for the case. They still need a suspect. So Pip thinks she would be the #1 suspect if Max is found not guilty. So, and she is planning for the future. So she tells Ravi, we have to cut off all communication until the trial is over, because if I get in trouble for this murder and they try to prove your involvement, I'll just be like, no, you'll have to say no. She coerced me. She threatened me. I was scared of her. I did it out of fear. So that way you won't get in trouble. And Ravi is super against this idea. He's like, do you know how long that's going to take? Like, there's absolutely no way I'm cutting off communication with you. And Pip is like, no, we have to do this. Then we catch up with Pip 89 days later. Turns out day 31 after Max's arrest, Billy was set free and his name was exonerated, and everybody now knows that Jason Bell was the DT killer. And 1 year, 7 months, and 28 days later, Pip gets a text that says, hey Sarge, remember me? So now we can assume that the verdict of the trial is in, and Max Hastings was found guilty, which is why Ravi's reaching out to Pip. He's like, oh, he was found guilty. Girl, we can be back together again. And that is the end of the book, which, Holly Jackson, you didn't want to give us a little happily ever after epilogue with Pip and Ravi and all her friends getting back together? Because during this whole time frame of the trial, Pip cut herself off from absolutely everybody. Cut herself off from all of her friends and was very distant from her parents. And she said she barely spoke to people in college. So like, we just deserved a little bit of a happily ever after moment. And that is the end to this chaotic, crazy, wild, bananas book. I can't believe Holly Jackson did that. She wrote that. She's like, I am making a name for myself in YA history. We're not going to go the way that everybody expects me to go. I am going to make you remember this series for the rest of your life. And she accomplished that because I was not expecting Pip to take the heel turn that she did, the vigilante turn that she did, the Dexter turn that she did, but I was here for it and I thought it was so much fun. I mean, definitely this book is very dark compared to the other books, but it was also very entertaining and very unhinged, and if you know me, I love a good unhinged novel. And that is finally the conclusion to me explaining the plot for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. So we are done, guys. We are done. We are done with the trilogy. I will be reading Killjoy this month for Summerween, so check that out if you want to see my reactions to that novella. But I'm very sad to be leaving these characters. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!